What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin and is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. You can find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ ANT. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage is a conversation that I'm very excited to have. It contains, if you watch this show regularly, which I hope a lot of you folks do, for those of you who don't and you're new, welcome to the show. I've been dropping little pieces regarding the larger cyclical, Rust and Coal, True Detective, Smash the Can, Time is a Flat Circle type of nuggets, really for the past couple of years, talking about, the direction football was going in, larger trends offensively and defensively, obviously, through the lens or shaped by what's going on with the Buffalo Bills. And ironically, the Buffalo Bills offense has really been kind of one of the poster children for why defenses have switched the way they have and the reason they've swung the pendulum in certain directions and in certain ways. And that's kind of where this conversation comes into in tonight's episode, looking at the 2024 Buffalo Bills offense and trying to see the schematic direction they are going to go in. Again, personnel, alignments, formations, groupings, anything and everything that relates to what we could expect to see from this offense. And then putting it kind of against a backdrop of the trends that we're seeing league-wide, offensively and defensively. So having that larger schematic football conversation, and then also tying it into how the Bills fall into that, what it means for them, so on and so forth, and all that kind of stuff. And to do that, I am joined by Mr. JP Acosta, one of, and I don't say this lightly, even though I do say it for a couple people, one of truly my favorite guests to grace the show. You crush it every time you're here. I brought you on for a specific reason, which we're going to get into in a minute. But one, I'm pumped to have you here in general. Two, I'm pumped to have you here for this conversation. Three, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the show.
I'm excited to get into the nitty gritty. I got the now defunct Orlando Guardians UFL shirt on, so I'm ready to get in the real nitty gritty of football.
I love it. We're all like flirted out. I'm wearing a Messi Inter Miami jersey. Even though it's still like Messi's it still breaks my heart to watch him. No disrespect, watching him play in the MLS, like it truly crushes my soul. And then I'm still a Barcelona guy and just watching how they're just so dysfunctional. And it's a conversation for another time. I love it, but it pains me at the same time. It's very hurtful. It's actually funny. In some of my prep for this episode, I came across an article I think you and Mark Schofield did at the beginning of 2023 regarding bigger bodied football coming into the play. Yep. And you also had the link in that article for the big boy grilling on the roof, which I love, just well played and well done. And that tied in even more so to why I wanted to have you on this episode. But what brought you onto, well, you're always on my radar, but what brought you specifically onto my radar for this episode is on the 10th, so 11 days ago, you had a tweet. So Matt Harmon, Reception Perception, Matt Harmon, put out some stuff on, put a quick little clip out on Keon Coleman and, why the Bills drafted him and where he's good at, where he's bad at, yada, yada. And you quote tweeted that and you said, quote, kind of goes into some of my thoughts on the Bills' KC-ish renovation to their offense. Going to try and be more efficient over the middle of the field and use yards after catch. But to get teams out of too high, they're going to try and beat teams up in the run game. And this is something I've echoed on this show before the draft happened, before free agency happened. And then once we started to see the dust settle a little bit on this Bills roster with what they've done from a wide receiver standpoint in terms of who they brought in through free agency in the draft, who they've jettisoned out and not brought back, and then where we currently sit with this team. So that's kind of the jump off point for this episode. Speak about that a little bit, what it means, why you said, kind of that Buffalo Bills, Kansas City Chiefs-ish renovation to their offense and kind of how it sets the table for the Bills in 2024 offensively for you.
All right. So to explain what I mean by the Bills' KC-ification of their offense in 2024, allow me to take you guys back to 2018, which of course is exactly how I want to start this off. Sean McVay's second year as a head coach of the Los Angeles Rams, he takes them to the Super Bowl, running wide zone play action, beating the absolute hell out of the Seattle cover 3 teams because all they would do was just run over routes off of play action. And then the next year, Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco takes the 49ers to the Super Bowl, where they just beat the hell out of those Seattle cover 3 teams by running over routes. So we get to this point where everybody in the NFL, everybody and their grandmother is running the Seattle cover. It's what worked in the mid 2010s. It's assumed it's going to be what's working now. Then the Chiefs draft a guy named Patrick Mahomes, and they just beat the crap out of teams, throwing it way down the field. I believe in Patrick Mahomes' first year as a starter, his average depth of target was 9 yards, which is unbelievable to think about now. So fast forward to 2023. Patrick Mahomes' average depth of target, 6.4. It has gone down drastically from that moment, but their offense has seemingly gotten better. And it's because they've gotten more efficient in the 5 to 10 yard areas. And how they did it is especially prominent in the way that defenses have started to play opposing offenses. So I talked a little bit about the Shanahan and McVays. Everybody and their grandmother is running that offense. If you want to be a coordinator in the NFL, you're probably coming from that tree. Defenses have started to punch back. I think of football, offense, and defense as it's sort of like chess, but it's also like boxing. Everybody's going to have a jab. Everybody's got to throw out the jab. And then they come over there with the right cross, and that knocks you out. The jab through like 2018 to like 2020 was wide zone in the NFL. Everybody's just throwing out that jab, throwing out the feeler, because cover 3, you'd get that weak side player in conflict because you shoot out the quarterback, and then there's the over route, whole bunch of conflict. That was the haymaker. The play action off of that was the haymaker. Then defenses just started playing too high. With how much everybody passed the ball, defense decided we're not going to let you hit the explosive plays. You were going to have to try and matriculate yourself down the field. And you can do that 3 ways. I like to think of it in 3 buckets. Okay. The first one is the Kansas City and to an extent Cincinnati style, which is you're just going to be the most efficient team in football throwing 5-yard routes. Patrick Mahomes is a buzzsaw in those areas because he's so quick with processing, so accurate underneath. And eventually, you're going to want to keep as many times and you get hit with the jab, you think you got to move out the way. So as many times as teams get hit by those 5-yard underneath routes, it turns into 6-7 yards because you're playing so deep. A safety is going to have to come up, and that's how you get out of the too high shell, and then you hit the explosives. Or you can just destroy teams in the run game. This is where I believe Detroit has leaned, and it makes sense considering how the personnel has changed in the NFL. You see a bunch of 220, 230-pound linebackers, got 280-pound defensive tackles, and it's because you want to get lighter against the pass. And because everybody's playing those penny fronts, those 5-1s, the bear fronts, where basically you want to play a gap and a half and you want to kind of slow down the wide zone. The reason those 5-1 fronts the reason the 5-1 fronts work against wide zone is because the linemen can't climb. In 4-man fronts, that center, if they're running, let's say an over front to the tight end, and you got a 1 tech in the back on the back side of the center, that guard can scoop out that 1 tech. Center is getting easy climb to the second level, and there's your cutback. In 5-man fronts, the center cannot climb because there's a nose tackle right in front of him.
Yeah, he's covered.
That is the immediate man. Zone, I can't believe I'm referencing him with this, but Urban Meyer a few years ago, inside zone, and he said, basically, it's whoever is in that area next to me. If there's a nose tackle there, if there's a 1 tech there, I'm climbing to him. If you're not covered, you get to the next level. You can't do that in 5-man fronts. Everybody has a man that they have to block because that is their next immediate area, which allows linebackers to run free. You know what works against 5-man fronts? Power and counter and hitting the hell out of defensive linemen. Look, everybody wants to play 220, 230-pound linebackers. We're going to win with 6 people in the box. That's all nice and good until a 330-pound guard is hitting your 220-pound safety, turn into a linebacker, and eventually, like, we see that start to wear on opponents. I know the wear and tear thing kind of gets, like, cliched on football Twitter, but that is
No, it's written.
absolutely
It's
a
real.
thing. It is, again, you keep getting hit with a jab, it's going to hurt. That jab is going to hurt after like the 6th round, you know? You're going to want to start moving. And I think that's where Detroit has gone. And to an extent, that's where Buffalo went under Joe Brady, but I'm going to get to that later. The third bucket where I think teams can get opposing defenses out of too high shells is having a +1 in the run game at quarterback. This is where Philadelphia absolutely destroyed the league in 2023 or 2022, because Jalen Hurts is such a magnificent runner as a quarterback. You have to account for that guy in the run game because of all the RPOs. You have to bring a guy down because you're outmanned in the run game. If you try to run those light boxes, you got a 6-man box. You have multiple options. You know, if you pull that zone read, you got a safety who's not as strong or a linebacker who's not as fast trying to tackle Jalen Hurts. It becomes that sort of problem.
Yes.
The Chiefs decided to be the most efficient team in football throwing underneath. And you know, there was a question about if trading Tyreek Hill was going to end up working, and then they won 2 straight Super Bowls. Well, I mean, it looked like it worked. But where the Bills come into this is it's been funny, but also like I've always half joked when I said this, but ever since 13 seconds, the Bills have been trying to do everything that the Chiefs have done to get to that point where they are not on the opposite side, on the losing side of 13 seconds again. You go draft Dalton Kincaid, who all the comps before the season was Travis Kelce. He was a Kelce clone. I think under Ken Dorsey, which we're going to get into later, they tried to become this uber efficient buzzsaw underneath, but then it flipped mid-season by firing Dorsey and going to Joe Brady. But they're like, look, we have a souped up ostrich at quarterback. Let's just beat the crap out of teams in the run game and then use our guys underneath, and that'll bring those safeties up. So when I say the Bills KCification, I mean, instead of trying to be this super explosive deep ball, no ball offense, they're going to try and matriculate their way down the field. They're going to try and go for those. If you're going to give us those 6 yards in the run game, we're going to take them. I always think about this quote because it's very funny in hindsight, but Brandon Staley always said, if we're fine giving up 5-yard runs as long as we don't give up 40-yard passes. And in his last season as coach, he gave up both 5-yard runs and 40-yard passes, because as much as you get hit in the run game, you're going to have to bring a safety up, especially with how light you're playing. So that's where I think the Bills want to exist in 2024. And some of their personnel decisions have kind of given us keys into that decision.
It's so funny, man. I'm like so hyped for this conversation, and you speaking, like, I didn't know where to start, like, with my points. And I also think it's funny too, because you first referenced like 2018 and McVay, and I've got significant coverage trends and their changes from 2018 to now. I want to start with the whole notion of, you know, those 5-man fronts or those non-even fronts versus those zone concepts. And to kind of put it in perspective for folks, just think of granted, Todd Gurley was banged up, and I think that was a significant part of why that Super Bowl turned out the way it did. But think of that Rams-Patriots Super Bowl and what that Rams offense was. They are the epitome, like JP was saying, of that wide zone, that rushing type of attack. And Bill Belichick and the Patriots came out. They didn't even come out and do like a 5 down front. They were playing like a 6-1. There was 6 down on the line. And you're not running zone. Like, you're not doing it. And then obviously, like, from a coverage perspective, they paired that with like single high stuff and like buzzing a safety down, and then had some quarters pieces. And it helps when you've got like Stephon Gilmore on a side and you can lock something down. And then again, Todd Gurley being significantly banged up. But that's what the Patriots did, was basically just like gap out the entire front. So the Rams had a problem getting to the edge with the wide zone and or just climbing in general. There was a body in every gap. Things were muddied. There was nowhere for dudes to go. And then again, you pair with guys like Kyle Van Noy and Donta Hightower and their ability to just physically demolish you. And that started kind of that trend of, okay, like we can use these fronts. And then you got a little bit evolution. You mentioned Brandon Staley, but Staley kind of with that Rams team towards the end before he went to the Chargers, I don't want to say championing, but kind of being the poster child for the tight front and being like, hey, we can just use like a 4-eye, a nose, and a 4-eye. And by covering the center and using these 2 4-eyes, we can string things out as much as we can. And we can force those zone teams to the outside and we can string things out. And yeah, we can try. We'll live with, 4 and 5 yards of carry and force things to our linebackers, our safeties fitting from depth. And we can still have, we might not have the numbers advantage in the box, but we won't get killed because we can string things out and be okay. And then eventually that kind of fell apart and they got bullied and teams were like, cool, we're just going to run like, trap and power and like GT counter and bash and like all these things against you. And, I like this comment from Charles who says pass to score and run to win. And there's so much in this conversation, and I'm gonna change the banner here. You mentioned 2018, and that's where I want to start to get into some of these coverage trends because these numbers are significant. So since 2018, I'm going to give you the coverage trends for single high coverages and 2 high coverages. This is single high from 2018 to now. 63%, 60%, 59%, 57%, 55%, 53%. So in 2018, single high coverage usage rate was at 63%. Last season, 53%, a 10 percentage point drop, which is huge.
You can tell. Yes. You can tell when Kyle Shanahan started figuring out how to beat these cover 3 teams. He purposely went to Atlanta with Dan Quinn to figure out how to break that defense. And you can tell as cover 3 started to dwindle and as the Shanahan acolytes started to pop up more around the NFL, those things correlate.
Absolutely. And then speaking of correlation, like we look at the other side and split safety coverages again from 2018 to last year in 2023, 34%, 35%, 36%, 39%, 41%, 42%. So an 8 percentage point increase in split safety coverages from 2018 to this past year, and a 10 percentage point drop in single high coverages to this past year. And that puts it in perspective, which is a conversation piece that, like, you mentioned, I think a lot of even casual fans now are onto it. This whole idea of, okay, 2 high coverage structures, put a cap on everything, keep everything in front of you, limit explosives. For Bills fans, it was ironically like Leslie Frazier was a defensive mind kind of at the forefront of this. And it's easy when you have safeties that can disguise coverage, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. But this whole idea of like, hey, we're going to limit explosives. And the Bills were one of the best teams at doing that year in and year out under Frazier. And the goal was, we're going to make you go on 12, 13, 14 play drives. And we think at some point you're going to have a holding penalty, or you're going to turn the ball over. Somebody's going to blow a block, and we can get you in 2nd and long or 3rd and long, and then we can get you off the field. This idea that you just cannot continue to nickel and dime it down the field efficiently. But then to your point, in those bigger games, the Chiefs are like, okay, we'll nickel and dime you. And then the Bengals were like, okay, we'll just nickel and dime you. And Joe Burrow in that divisional round was like, cool, I'm just going to throw 5-yard routes all day. And there's oodles. And to put that into perspective as well, to open up old wounds, like you said, you hit those routes underneath, but there's so much space because defenses are putting the cap. For Bills fans, think of that Bills-Bengals playoff game in the divisional round where he's dumping it down to Mixon or Tyler Boyd, and you're watching it on broadcast, and there's no one in the frame because everybody's dropping so deep. Even like they're playing cover 2 at times, but they're not even getting physical with the cloud corner. They're just still having him sink, and it's just like, okay, I'm going to dump it down 3 yards past the line, and Joe Mixon's going to have a gain of 12 because there's no one there. And then you factor in the run game and all these pieces and all these switches. I want to start with that run game piece. Like the run game and or heavier personnel plus formations and alignments as that natural swing of the pendulum to answer those, especially if we break it down and unpack it into a larger defensive conversation, the 2 high coverages, plus the prevalence of nickel and dime, plus smaller penetration-based interior defensive linemen. Let's talk about that piece, because again, you mentioned the run game, and I think this is a significant part of it too. It's not only those 2 high structures, it's everything defenses did. Like it's the fronts paired with the coverage structure on the back end, then paired with the personnel, because how many teams are living in nickel and dime and have, I don't know, majority of their defensive tackles, especially their 3-tech, 300, 305 pounds. Maybe even if you're the Bills, like the Bills have a physical, heavier 1-tech in Daquan Jones. And I feel like I need to look him up right now. Where am I in my notes? Daquan Jones is listed at 320 pounds. So like that's big.
Him and Eli Anku are the two biggest defensive tackles on the team, and they're like 320, 325.
Yeah. And that's not like for today, that's like, oh, okay, like that's big. Not like the cyclical nature of like football, like a 320-pound, like that's your like enforcer. That's your dude that's gonna like take on double teams and like work against the run. Like, and Daquan, and when you look at Daquan Jones, he's physical and he's great, but he's not like this huge monster of a man like Vita Vea, or I think of the old days of like Casey Hampton and like Gilbert Brown for the Packers and these dudes that were just monsters inside, granted different fronts and all that. But so let's talk about that. Let's unpack it. The run game as an answer to these too high coverage structures, nickel dime defenses, smaller penetration based interior defensive alignment, but also factoring in, if you want, heavier personnel, formation, alignments, all that kind of stuff, as why you think that answer is coming around for teams and how the Bills factor into that.
So I think it all comes together, especially when you talk about the structure of defenses combined with the personnel. So we talked a lot about the penny front, 5-1 defenses, those 5-man fronts. Those edge players are playing a wide 9 to make sure you seal off the edge on wide zone, first of all. Second of all, those guys are maybe like right now, like maybe 230 to 250. You don't find a lot of I hate using them as an example, but like Simeon Rice and walking around. Javon Curse ain't walking around.
No, I was in my head, I was like Javon Curse. Like, I don't know why I was just immediately
Javon Curse ain't walking around on the edge. You're not dropping him in coverage, but that's also a thing you have to factor in with those 5-man fronts. Because you have 5 people on that line, somebody has to drop in pass coverage. So you can't have a 270-pound defensive lineman out on the edge, or else you're going to end up looking like the Rams in the playoff game against the Lions, where Michael Hoyt, who is 300 pounds, playing on the edge, is getting picked apart in coverage. That's the trade-off that you have to make. So, yeah, you're getting lighter up front, but in their mind, it's, okay, we can drop this guy into coverage if we want to. But this pairs with how you play your structure in coverages. Because of all the quarters coverage, you're asking your safeties to come off the roof and help fit the run from the third level, not even second level, because you want to get that flow. In outside zone, which is what is made to stop, you want to get flow. That's why you have 5 linemen up there. They're not there to necessarily make the plays. They're there to hold up the blockers. So your linebackers can get run through, which is why linebackers are smaller, because they're flowing to the ball. Safeties are coming down, flowing to the ball. But how teams are starting to counteract that offensively is if your edge player is 240 pounds and playing a wide 9, we're just going to kick him out with our guard and run a counter at him and force him to eat those hits. And if your safety wants to come up and make a play, go ahead and try and hit our 330-pound guard. I think the biggest example of this is what the Rams have actually done starting from 2018 to what they looked like last year. Last year, we all know Sean McVay as the wide zone master, talked about it earlier in the show. But this past year, hired Mike LaFleur from the Jets, and all of a sudden, they start running a bit more duo.
Bro, yes, I have that in my notes. Talk about it.
All that in. Even before Mike LaFleur was hired, Ben Skoranek was playing fullback at 218 pounds. He was just trying stuff because he knew that eventually he was going to get beat by those 5-1, those penny fronts. He was the one to employ Brandon Staley. He knew how to beat those defenses. So you start seeing them throw more duo at teams. You start seeing them throw more counter. And even this offseason, with what their moves have been, moving Steve Avila to center, who I believe Steve Avila is maybe 320, 330. I have to check. But
right now.
They went and signed Jonah Jackson from Detroit, who is a monster in the run game. We've all seen Detroit. That's what they want to do. They want to get at you. Yeah, Steve Avila is listed at 6'3", 332, and is going to be their starting center. You know what they want to do.
That's
They
big. That's
work,
big, especially for Bills fans who are used to like Mitch Morse at center. And he's like 305 movement. Yeah, Steve Avila's like 330. And that's a real 330. It's not like, oh, he weighs like 315 and we put him at 330. No, he's a real 330.
Yeah, like even their starting offensive line on the interior is going to be Jonah Jackson at 312, Steve Avila at 330, Kevin Dotson at 321. They want to move people. They want to get
People
at
movers.
you. Instead of wanting to go around you, they're going to want to get at you. And
Yep.
that's kind of the shift in offenses and defenses. That's the punch, counter punch. Instead of trying to run around defenses because they're playing all these they're playing bigger guys up front. They try to go around with the wide zone. Now, because teams are trying to flank the edges, they're just going to run at you. And, you
Swing
know,
that pendulum.
It's the pendulum swing, like you said. Where the Bills factor into this is really interesting because I think we got a glimpse of it with Joe Brady. He kind of married the gap scheme with having Josh Allen as your quarterback. I think for a large portion of Ken Dorsey's time as offensive coordinator, plus, of course, Josh Allen injuries, there was a little reluctance to run Josh Allen on design runs. So I pulled it from Sports Info Solutions from, I believe, the first 10 weeks of the season when Ken Dorsey was the offensive coordinator. Josh Allen had 9 design runs in 10 games, which not a lot in 10 games. Joe Brady, over 7 games after he got hired, Josh Allen had 20 design runs. You can tell, like, we're going to use this guy as a threat in the run game. If you want to play those light boxes, again, think about the Cowboys game. The Cowboys play really light. They played a 205-pound safety at linebacker. If you go ahead and do that if you want to, we will run tackle dart at you for the entire game and make that safety come up and try and fit the run.
Literally the entire game is just dart,
the whole game.
over
Dart,
and over.
Duo, counter. That's it. Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown played the games of their lives. And it's just pulling and hitting this 205-pound linebacker. So that's where I think the Bills are going to shift more offensively, is combining the physicality of Josh Allen running the ball and that threat of him. It's forcing teams to bring up a guy, or it's forcing teams to play bigger. And that's something else I think Joe Brady did a lot really well with the run game, is he got bigger up front. He would bring in Quentin Morris. He'd play a lot of Dawson Knox and Kincaid together. Kincaid is not a super duper blocker, but he will give effort. And
he's functional.
Yeah, he tries as a blocker. Which is something you cannot say about a lot of tight ends who are receivers first.
And that's a good piece. Like, that's not even like a passive aggressive jab. Like, blocking is like 70% effort. So with how good of a receiver he is, the fact that he tries as hard as he does as a blocker, like, that's not like, oh, he tries, participation trophy. No, that's like a legitimate compliment, because to your point, like, it's effective.
Yeah. So bringing in Knox with him, bringing in Quentin Morris, having an extra tackle on the field. They were going to try and get bigger and force teams to get bigger with them. They were going to match them. You know, that's the push and pull that we see offensively. We see it a lot these days, is we're going to try and get bigger and see how you defend us. The Chiefs force teams to get bigger. They would just add tight ends onto the field. They just keep adding them to play with Travis Kelce. And if you want to play light, we will run the ball at you. That is, again, Travis Kelce tries as a blocker. He gives effort. But you also have Noah Gray and Blake Bell, who are very good blockers. They were going to try and get at you in the run game. But if you try and get bigger and try and match them numbers-wise, they just throw the ball. And your linebacker, who is only on the field to fit the run, is ending up having to guard Travis Kelce, which is not a very good, that's not something that you want to put your linebacker out there to do. So where I think the Bills factor into this is they're going to want to try and get bigger and get more physical and use, not necessarily just run Josh Allen 15 times a game. That's not what I'm saying at all, but use his threat. Just have him pull a zone read once, or run that. They run that tackle dart with Josh Allen as the designed runner, where it's like we're not trying to fake anything. We're not zone reading this. He's taking this ball and he's running forward. Do that. and just have that threat of, oh, we can pull this out whenever we want to. And that'll force teams to account for him in the run game. And then you start to get into those passing plays.
Or you can run that QB, that GT counter with that back away action, that QB GT counter bash. But instead of having Allen keep it, you give it to James Cook like they did under Dorsey in the playoff run. And then now you got like an edge defender who's doing that surf technique, but he comes down a little too much to respect Allen. And now Cook is out that front door because of how fast he is, and you have a problem. And then if you pair it right with, I don't know, Mac Hollins and Keon Coleman as your blockers on that front side against regular, on average, 200-pound corners. One of them is probably a slot corner, so you're looking at 195 maybe, and maybe the bigger body. Chance there's a bigger body corner on the outside at 205. They both pale in comparison, size, frame, weight, and length to Hollins and Keon Coleman, and that's where things start to get really interesting. Like, oh, man, this conversation, I'm like all over my notes. I'm so excited with like all these conversation pieces. I love that you mentioned the Rams, because so much the Rams are such everybody like tied to that Shanahan tree, like McVay and the LaFleurs and like everybody, and how they've like adapted and molded. And the Rams offense last year, you nailed it. And it was one of my big points, like them getting to duo, the creative ways they got into duo, like using fast motion and pairing it with their condensed formations and alignments. But then also, again, their ability to run that ball downhill, which is what a duo run is. That is a people moving vertical displacement type run. That is an at you type run where we're bigger than you, we're more physical, we can get at you. Who are their wide receivers? Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Tremendous pass catchers, very good run blockers, good size, good physicality, good effort. And that's been a staple in that Ram system since McVay's been there with Kupp. But who was there before Nacua? Robert Woods. Tremendous blocker. They've got these receivers that are able to insert, and you want them to dig out a safety? Cool. You want them to fit up on a linebacker? Cool. You want to, I don't know, you want to run some toss on the outside and you want them to wash down an edge? Cool. They can do that. Like, you've got those guys. Similar to I'm getting ahead of myself, with the Detroit Lions. Great run game last year for the Detroit Lions. Just for running back carries only, they were second in EPA per attempt. The Rams, for reference, were sixth in EPA per attempt per SIS. But the Lions, second in EPA per attempt with running back carries. Again, Jared Goff, not a +1 in the run game, not this threat with the ball in his hands. But you think of the Lions and you're like, oh, ton of 11 personnel. I think they're at like a 95. No, not. Oh, yeah, actually, I think 95%. Or no, that was the Rams, 95%, 11 personnel rate. Let me go. Detroit had a 64% 11 personnel usage rate last year. Yeah, the Rams were at 95%, which is crazy. But again, the Rams can live in that world and run the ball downhill because they've got Puka and they've got Cooper Kupp and they've got Tyler Higbee and these dudes that have these body types and frames paired with athleticism. And then even the Lions, people think, oh, well, again, like, and I get the sexiness, but Amon-Ra St. Brown and then what Sam Laporta did last year. Their wide receiver with the second most snaps last year for the Detroit Lions, only about 180 less than Amon-Ra St. Brown, was Josh Reynolds. Behind Josh Reynolds was Donovan Peoples-Jones. Bigger, bodied, power slot type options, but dudes who can block on the perimeter against outside corners or come down in condensed formations and alignments and get tight and dig out a safety, fit up on a linebacker, insert. That's such a game changer from a math perspective, just from a personnel standpoint alone. Like, forget about alignment for a quick second. You're just talking about personnel. If you're going with 11, if you're the Rams or the Lions, for example, teams are going to match that with nickel because you have to, because you have a legitimate threat in the pass. But then that nickel defender is outsized against Cooper Kupp or Josh Reynolds or Nacua, or if he gets matched up on the tight end and depending on what you want to do. Then you also factor in, especially from a Rams perspective, but the Lions do this as well, those condensed formations, which really can put defenses into a bind further. Those condensed formations allows teams to get to more in the run game because you have more bodies attached or near to the line of scrimmage, so you can add gaps, which is huge because, again, we're still running zone, but we're trying to get more gap because we're trying to take advantage of those smaller fronts or those alignments and fronts that we're seeing. So instead of trying to get wide, we're going at you, either with double teams downhill with inside zone or with duo, or legitimate, we're running power, or we're running GT counter, or we're running trap, or we're running wham, and being able to do that out of those condensed formations, again, adds to it because you've got more bodies towards the line of scrimmage. You could get to more in the run game. And then those teams with bigger bodied wide receivers like the Rams and Lions have the added threat of blocking on the perimeter, or like we talked about, getting fancy and having them get involved in the box versus a second level defender or a safety or an edge. And again, like you can literally run like Y insert with them because of what they can do. And then you talk about the Bills, and look at what they have now in that wide receiver room with Keon Coleman and Matt Collins. And if you're looking at it from a pass catching perspective, Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. And Shakir can even block a little bit, but they really swung towards more of that bigger body notion. And I think it presents the idea of, hey, we're going to beat teams up. We're going to beat them up physically. And it could be added with that, +1 in the run game of Josh Allen, but it doesn't necessarily even have to be that. Like you said, James Cook, and I really like the addition of Ray Davis this past year, and I like Ty Johnson for what he's worth as an RB2 or an RB3. Like, the ability to get physical and get downhill with pace is something the Bills are going to be able to do. They're going to be able to create that displacement, but then also have an advantage schematically and or from an alignment perspective potentially, because you've got guys like Kincaid and Knox and Hollins and Keon Coleman, who I don't think Keon Coleman is the sexiest right now, and Matt Collins isn't either, but the Bills had trouble versus man coverage last year. They had issues separating consistently versus man. And I think a lot of what we thought, and I'm in that boat as well, was like, okay, you need guys either with true speed or you need dudes who can route people up. So if you're looking in round 1, it was like, okay, give me Brian Thomas. Give me A.D. Mitchell, or you know what? Hey, give me Ladd McConkey, somebody who can route anyone up at any time and create separation. And instead, the Bills lean more into that power forward Sean Kemp type of world with Keon Coleman. And I think it's because of that physicality and the commitment to the run we're going to see in 2024. But I also think it's because they're going to pair it with condensed formations, which can help in the run game like we talked about. But condensed formations can also help you beat man coverage by having your pass catchers run crossers or switch releases versus defenders that may be bunched up or near the line of scrimmage. And the close proximity of those pass catchers can also help yield open targets quicker. So you can play tight in those condensed looks and play power football and play downhill and create displacement, or you can play tight in condensed formations and still throw the ball. And if you have those bigger bodied athletic pass catchers like Knox, like Kincaid, like Coleman, like Matt Collins, who can also function as blockers, then you can ask a lot of questions to the defense pre-snap that they have to provide answers for post-snap, and not every defense will have an answer to those questions. And I think that's where it starts to go into, like, I think you're going to see more in the run game. And the Bills already had a very strong run game last year. They were top 10 easily in EPA per attempt from a running back perspective, taking out Josh Allen carries and scrambles and all that stuff. They were consistently one of the best teams on the ground last year. I think they lean in more to it this year, and then pair that with alignments and personnel that have a physical, bigger bodied advantage. And maybe, again, you could just be regular spread and do it, but I think it pairs well with condensed formations, gives you that advantage in the run, but also gives you the opportunity to beat man. And then if you pair it with play action, you can start to generate explosives. And I think that's where I think the Bills really start to move towards more of that McVay-esque-ish style where it's condensed formations, downhill, generate explosives off of that. And then you have the mobility of Allen as a runner, or in terms of bootlegs and what you can do off the pass. And it starts to get really creative, all stemming from that power downhill, mash you in the face type of mentality.
And I think another interesting team to watch and kind of study when you look at how this offensive shift has come about is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think it's very interesting, especially with 2020 and Tom Brady. They were able to get teams out of too high personnel because they weren't pretty simple as a run in terms of run concepts. They'd run counter, they'd run power, they'd run split zone. But they could do that because the receiver that had some of the most snaps on the field was Chris Godwin, who was a freaking awesome blocker. Yes. They also had Rob Gronkowski, who was not the greatest receiver at that point in time, but he was 6'7", 270. That's like having another lineman out there as a tight end. So they were able to get at you in the run game and then get at you in the passing game. Because if your linebackers want to come up, we all know it. Brady fakes the handoff, takes one step, and throws a dart over the middle.
I
For
see it in
50
my
yards.
nightmares. I close my
Yeah,
eyes and I see it right now.
it's like he doesn't even turn his back to the defense. He just knows it's going to be there.
Yeah. He could throw with his eyes closed because he knows it's going to be there.
Yeah, so that's another interesting way of trying to get at teams in too high, which is we're going to hit you over the head. We're going at you. Tom Brady had 9 yards on his average depth of target that year, which you don't think about like when it comes to, oh, we're going to run the ball really, really effectively and then kind of just dump it underneath. No, Brady and the Bucks were going downfield because he also had Mike Evans.
Yes.
Where I think you bring up a really good point is the condensed splits. And something that I noticed in watching Joe Brady and watching the Bills offense was that is mainly how Dalton Kincaid kind of won. In those condensed splits, he got a free release. And I think in 2024, Kincaid is going to be the tip of the spear for this passing game.
Yes.
There'll be a lot of option routes, a lot of choice routes. He got a lot of those in the second half of the season with Joe Brady, where he was, you just run him into space. He's very good at finding space.
Yes.
He's, like I said, he's not the most ridiculous athlete. He's not the biggest or tallest or fastest, but he knows how to find space. He knows how to win against underneath defenders. And as many times you run those option routes, as many times as you talk about the McVayisms of this offense, potentially, it is Cooper Kupp running the choice routes, nailing you for 6-7 yards, and then they hit the dig behind you as soon as you jump up on it. So now you're thinking about what this Bills offense can be and how you can kind of win over the middle, which is the most valuable part of the field. That's where I think the Bills passing game wants to win. They want to win in short areas. They want to win with yards after the catch. It's why you go sign Curtis Samuel.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get better. You want to get better after the catch. Keon Coleman, very good after the catch. I mean, the dude was returning punts at Florida State. That's not a stiff at receiver. Kincaid was good after the catch. But something else I think is going to be another calling card for this Bills offense is the verticality of the running backs in the passing. Over the last stretch of the season when Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator, of course, you take it with a grain of salt because the total volume of passes went way down after Joe Brady became coordinator. But the top two targets in terms of yards per route run under Joe Brady, number 2 was Khalil Shakir, and number 1 was James Cook. James Cook was getting downfield in the passing game. That is something where, again, in too high, you want to get your running back downfield. You think about it when you think about all the quarters coverage. If you have that running back lined up to the strength of the quarters, that's the number 3 receiver. That linebacker is going to have to carry that number 3 receiver vertical.
And they started to, that's also another Chiefsism that they borrowed, those 4 strong looks and flooding those concepts, they're flooding those zones and draining coverages. And ironically, they scored a touchdown on it on a basically 4x1, 4 strong against the Chiefs in the regular season game where they ran that halfback seam like jet right up the seam. And like that's another piece that they borrowed and added. Like you continue to be able to take, and I think it was actually, I don't know if it was single high. I just remember Mike Edwards nailing down and then Cook splitting through. But yeah, that's another element too.
Right down the middle, and there was nobody there to defend him. You think about Joe Brady at LSU. Who was catching all those passes out of the backfield?
Clyde Edwards-Helaire, baby, made him a first-round pick.
He was getting downfield in the passing game. So I think that is where they're going to try and win offensively. That's where they're going to try and generate explosives, which is they're going to try and get Cook downfield. He's a good pass catcher. He's good at running routes downfield. You want to get him as your explosive guy. You sign MBS to take the top off of defenses to kind of relieve the congestion in the middle of the field. You have Coleman running I think he is at his best in the 5 to 10 yard areas. He is a mid-range player. That's a mid-range receiver where he can run those slants. He runs the digs really well. He gets those crossers where you talked about it in condensed splits and tight splits. You get him running across the field away from somebody. I mean, we saw it in the gauntlet. We saw it on tape. He is a very good game speed receiver. So that's where you want to get him running away from people horizontally. You get Kincaid is kind of running those in between those option routes. And I think Curtis Samuel factors into this by being kind of the the yards after the catch guy. I think Shakir's actually going to be used a bit more as a vertical option because, again, under Joe Brady, he had the second most yards per route run. I think that is going to be something that he is going to be able to work on, and he's going to be able to develop under Joe Brady with another full season as Joe Brady a coordinator. I think that's where they're going to try and win. It's not going to be as much. We're not going to completely Chiefsify it, and you're going to see everybody running 5-yard stop routes, or they're going to RPO everything. But I think they're going to try and get at you in the run game, and then they're going to try and run away from you with tight splits. They're going to try and get running backs involved downfield. But really, they want to try and win over the most congested parts of the field, which is the middle area.
I like that, and I'm in lockstep with you. I'm also looking up I'm looking up because there's another ridiculous like Khalil Shakir stat that was just so. I mean, take the whole season, but just factoring in what year am I in? I'm gonna have to find it later because I'm out of control. I think that pairs really well, like that middle of the field attacking style. And again, like you've got Kincaid, who you talked about, like I always say he operates with a fluid technicality, and you pair that with his feel for coverage and his understanding of leverage and how he knows like how to position. He's so good transitioning from pass catcher to runner. He's like the poster child for that. You run that sit route over the ball, and as he catches it, he makes that drop step with his foot. So as he catches it, he's catching it and tucking it, and he's already getting upfield. Or his ability to catch it, and say he runs like a little arrow route, a little flat route. And as he catches it, he knows that apex defender is hauling ass to try and get him on the flat. So as he catches it, he shifts his body. So as he catches it, he can start already going back and go back inside. So as that defender is coming this way, he's coming back inside and he's getting upfield. Like his feel for that is so strong. Shakir, I think, will get some verticality. I also think Shakir, I hate saying this because I don't want to put that comp out there, but I think Shakir occupies some of the Cole Beasley-esque essence of this offense from a receiver perspective. I really think Cole Beasley will end up becoming Dalton Kincaid, like that slot guy who just runs, like you said, those choice routes on the inside. And it's just pure recognizing coverage. If they do A, I do this. If they do B, I do that. Oh, they did this. Cool. I'm going to sit down for 5 yards, get forward for 7 or 8, and now it's second down in 2 or whatever the hell. I think Shakir will function in that way. I think Samuel, to your point, gives you that speed to now run away from dudes on those deep overs. In addition to giving you some of the fun gadgetry pieces, like let's put him in the backfield. Let's get creative and go, 4 strong or 4x1, or let's go quads. And then we can send Samuel in motion. And now it's another element of, okay, are we going to give him the ball on the jet sweep? Because now if you go with a legit like quads, that box is super light. And now but you know what? It might not even be crazy light because the defense might be like, no, this is a ploy to run Josh Allen on a draw, or they're going to run power with Allen. We got to keep a dude in the box. And now you're just running simple wide receiver screens, or you can just, go regular like pass concepts and flood coverages. Or again, you send Curtis Samuel, you send some piece. I completely forgot about MVS, which is nuts because we did a whole film breakdown on him last week. But he's another one in that mold of Keon Coleman, Matt Collins, MVS. MVS is nice because he has legitimate verticality. Like he can take the top off the defense, but he also can function as that power slot or that big bodied threat on the perimeter. So even if you are in, like, think about it, if you're in 11 personnel. And so 11 personnel, for those who don't know, you're 1 running back, you're 1 tight end. That means you have 3 wide receivers. If you're in 11 personnel, but your 3 wide receivers are Keon Coleman, Matt Collins, and MVS, there's passing concepts.
Forwards.
Exactly. You got 3 power forwards on the field who defenses have to account for from a passing perspective because they're still wide receivers and they still present a threat. MBS is going to present a threat vertically. Keon Coleman, that big body contested catch style with athleticism after the catch, but also all 3 of those dudes are going to be a factor as run blockers. And then if the 1 tight end on the field is Dalton Kincaid, now again, it's like, okay, who are we answering for in coverage? Do we have a nickel who can cover Dalton Kincaid? Do we have a nickel who can, whoever the hell you want to put in the slot from the receiver perspective, do we have a nickel who can box with Keon Coleman or MVS? And then if they don't, you run downhill, or maybe you don't even go from like a spread perspective with that 11. You just go into trips and go with a condensed look, maybe like trips to the left, and you're going like nub tight end, and you go with that nub tight end in the boundary, and then you can run to that nub tight end side, or again, create the space with the condensed look on the other. It forces the defense to have to answer all these questions. And I think that that's where a lot of the conversation comes in because of, again, I'm not saying this is the sexiest pass catching group on paper, because I really don't think it is. Like, I think, especially from a casual fan perspective, got people who aren't into the schematics and the bones of it, I think if you look at the Bills wide receiver room, there's a good chance like most fans would take their team's wide receivers over the Bills wide receiver room. Like, it's not the sexiest, it's not the flashiest on paper, but I think where they can succeed is in the schematics of it and having an advantage in legitimate like X's and O's, because the body frames and skill sets that are present in the wide receiver room paired with the tight ends just creates matchup problems for defenses in a variety of ways. And that's where a lot of the best offenses are starting to succeed, because of the matchups they can create in the pass and the run. So you take the final four teams from 2023, the Niners, the Lions, the Ravens, and the Chiefs. The Chiefs are a bit of an outlier, but they are for everything, because it's like Reed and Mahomes and Spags and all the crap that they do. But the Niners, DVOA, first in DVOA, first in the pass, second in the run. The Lions, fifth in DVOA, seventh in the pass, fourth in the run. The Ravens, fourth in DVOA, fifth in the pass, first in the run. The Chiefs, eighth in DVOA, eighth in the pass, 17th in the run. But they have those matchup pieces that can help them in the run. But you talk about those groupings and their usage rates for each team. The 49ers, they had a 39% 11 personnel usage rate last year, which was 31st. What they did, they had the advantage with Kyle Juszczyk, who is a huge matchup nightmare. For a lot of teams, the best mismatch creator is usually your tight end, especially if you have like a true dual threat type of tight end. Go back to those Patriot teams with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez. You had two tight ends who could both pass, or who could function as receivers and also run blocks. So how do you choose to match that? The Niners, 36% 21 personnel usage rate, 11% 22 personnel usage rate. 60% of their snaps came with either two tight ends or two running backs on the field. And then again, the Lions, after that, so fourth in terms of rushing DVOA, second in terms of EPA per attempt on the ground for their running backs. The Niners, for reference, fourth in terms of EPA per attempt on the ground for their running backs. The Lions, like we talked about, 64% 11 personnel usage rate. But again, that 11 personnel has Josh Reynolds and bigger bodied wide receivers. But they also paired that with a 22% 12 personnel rate, a 5% 13 personnel rate, and a 5% 21 personnel rate. And then the Ravens, fifth in EPA per attempt for running backs on the ground, first in rushing DVOA, 47% 11 personnel usage rate, which was 29th. 48% of their snaps came with either two tight ends or two running backs. But again, they've got a million tight ends, and that's with Mark Andrews being hurt for a bunch of the year. 26% 21 personnel, 10% 20, 12% 12 personnel. And then the Chiefs, 10th in EPA per attempt for running back carries, 63% 11 personnel usage rate. But again, who's that 11 personnel coming with? Guys like MVS and Justin Watson, even Rashee Rice to a degree, but then having Kelsey on there muddies it. And then go to 12 personnel, where they had a 28% 12 personnel usage rate, which was fourth, a 7% 13 personnel usage rate, which was also fourth. And I didn't get into the stats for or the rankings for everyone else, but like the Niners, 21 personnel, second most, 22 is first. The Ravens, third in 21 personnel, first in 20. It's all about creating those mismatches for defenses. And you just got to lean into whatever skill set you have. The Ravens have a bunch of dual threat tight ends, and they also have Pat Ricard, and then they have Lamar Jackson. The Niners, for as much as people talk about Shanahan and then like them adding McCaffrey and Debo and Ayuk, which is fair, the mismatch straws that stir the drink for the Niners are George Kittle and then big time with Kyle Juszczyk, because you've got this fullback who allows you to run traditional run concepts with zone and gap, but also he can get downfield on rail routes or wheels. They can line him up and split him out wide, and he can run hitches or run overs. You can bring him in motion. They use him in that surge motion for a lot of those Zorro runs and all the things that they do. All of these top offenses are now starting to get into the mismatch world. So it's not just this is a really good football player and we have really good schematic design. You have that schematic design that's taking advantage of the mismatches. And I think that's where this Bills offense has to succeed and why so much is going to be on Joe Brady's plate, because I do think there is the opportunity for mismatches to be created and taken advantage of with the tight ends and receivers on this roster, even though neither room is holistically dominant. I don't think anybody's looking at the Bills tight end or wide receiver room outside and being like, man, like they're going to eat us up in this game. But if Joe Brady pushes the right buttons and pulls the right levers, he's got all these mismatch creators and mismatch potential there. And when you pair it with how the great and top offenses in the NFL are leaning, that's where I think it starts to get really interesting. And then again, of course, you're pairing those personnel groupings with formations and with alignments and stuff. And then it starts to get really hectic for what defenses have to account for.
Yeah, and I think, especially with the Lions, there's a reason that they extended that tender to Brock Wright. You might not think about it as a tight end too, but he absolutely kicks ass in the run game. Like he is able to get downfield. He's able to move people in the run game. And I think that's something where I think the Bills, like you said, they might not have the sexiest receiver core or skill position group core, but they are all complementary. They all have layers to it. I think the biggest thing that offenses like should avoid is trying to get a bunch of the same guys. Like the Jaguars struggled with this last year. They had a bunch of guys who won in the in between. You're trying to win basketball games with 11 people who shoot in the mid range. That creates a congested offense. You don't want to self-inflict those errors offensively. And I think the Bills have learned from that. And instead of having a bunch of guys who can go downfield in a hurry, you got MVS who can do that, but that's what he does. That is his specialty. You got Khalil Shakir who can do that, but also does sort of the short in-between stuff. Jan Coleman is an in-between route runner. He's an in-between route runner. Dalton Kincaid, man of 1,000 option routes. That's his game. He is going to be the underneath. He is going to be the choice route person that the Bills are going to run on all those.
And if you get him in the right situation, like he can get vertical. If you have a safety or a line, I mean, we saw it. I love Kyle Duggar, but he took advantage of Duggar in those matchups because the Pats were like, cool, we're going to put Duggar on Kincaid. And it was like, no, he doesn't have the speed to roll with Kincaid. So he can present that verticality. And again, you can get him either with alignment or with motion and stuff. You can get him in those matchups where you can take advantage of his athleticism and speed, not because he's a burner, but because he's that much faster than whoever the bigger body dude is that's covering him.
Yeah, and now you think about what the Chiefs were able to do to opposing defenses by simply just adding tight ends onto the field.
Yes.
They just keep throwing a tight end onto the field. You want to treat our 12 personnel like nickel? We'll just put another tight end out there.
We're just going to go 13, and then we're going to run it down your throat.
Go ahead. You want to treat like nickel now? Go for it. I think of a play last year in the divisional game against the Bills where the Chiefs were in 13 personnel and they run scissors with Noah Gray and Travis Kelce, and it puts poor old AJ Klein in the worst bind ever, and Noah Gray ends up wide open. And it's things like that where you create the matchup problems. You can either do it by, like you said, being the Rams, who have this 11 personnel on practically all their offensive snaps, but they have receivers who can dig guys out in the run game. You think about the Buccaneers, who can dig guys out in the run game with Chris Godwin, Trey Palmer. Those guys work in the run game.
Yes.
Or you can get bigger with tight ends. You can get bigger with fullbacks. You can play Reggie Gilliam. I think that's something that Ken Dorsey tried to do, was get Reggie Gilliam onto the field a bit more. But I think Joe Brady decided instead of Gilliam, he would use an extra lineman or put Quentin Morris on the field.
Or he'd go with legitimate like pony personnel, and he'd do Ty Johnson and James Cook at the same time.
Yeah, and that's another way that you can force teams into these matchup problems. The Packers did it with A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. The Cowboys did it with Zeke and Tony Pollard.
Yeah.
It's those types of things where you have the personnel and you have the ability. It's just now about how to temper it. It's deciding what you want to be. It's like a choose your own adventure book. You know, you can choose to beat the crap out of teams in the run game. Well, how are you going to do it? Are you going to put a fullback on the field? Are you going to try and live in 12 and 13? I think that's something that the Bills tried to do after drafting Kincaid. Like that is their, oh, we'll just line up in 12 personnel. But they still treated their 12 personnel like nickel. So now it's, do you add another tight end on the field? Do you want to make it 13? Or do you instead go away from 12 personnel and just get guys like Mac Hollins, like Keon Coleman, and say, okay, we'll just live in 11 personnel, but we'll have guys who can block their ass off. So it's those types of decisions that I think are being made by the Bills front office to create not necessarily a more explosive offense. I don't think it'll be as explosive as Bills offenses in years before, but I think it'll be more sustainable.
I think that's a good way to put it. And yeah, I expect to see more. I don't expect to see a ton of like 20 plus yard gains and these big explosives downfield, but I expect to see I think a lot of this Bills offense is going to generate like 6 to 13 yards per play, like either in the run or the pass. And then if somebody breaks a tackle, it can turn into 15 or 20 plus, and you kind of go from there. And that could be breaking the tackle on the pass or breaking the tackle on the run. And man, when you were talking, I was just thinking about the teams you're mentioning that go like Pony and like Zeke and Pollard and Jones and Dillon. And I just think of how unfair that 49ers backfield is. Granted, Juszczyk's not getting carries, but like him and McCaffrey in the backfield, like, it's a legitimate threat for Juszczyk to be the lead blocker for McCaffrey. Or like they could shift and they both could go to the slot, or they both could go out wide and run routes, or like they could run routes from the backfield. Like, again, it's all mismatch generation. It's all mismatch creation. Same thing, going back to your +1 and the thought with the Eagles, like the Eagles offense is so mismatch based because of Hurts with his legs, but then his arm, because you have to account for their running back ground game, their Jalen Hurts ground game. And then they got AJ Brown and they've got Devonta Smith and they've got Dallas Goedert. And it's like, okay, can we commit bodies to the run? Because can we cover AJ Brown one-on-one? Now we got to keep somebody over the top. Okay, like you can't stop the run. You can't stop their regular run game, the Jalen Hurts run game. Now it's a mismatch creator from a numbers perspective. You create a mismatch with the math. The Bills, I think, could do that with Josh Allen as the +1, but I think their mismatch creation can come in the form of the Chiefs, who, yeah, they're in 12 or 13 personnel, but one of those tight ends is Travis Kelce, so it changes how you match schematically. And then what the Niners can do, what the Ravens can do, what the Lions can do. You take all these pieces, even if they do go 12, if you're going 12 and it's, again, Knox and Kincaid, and then the two receivers are Coleman and MVS or Coleman and Mac Hollins, like you could take one of them and just hip them off, like have Knox or Kincaid, whichever one you want, as your Y, hip the other one off of him, and then hip one of those big-bodied receivers off of that, and then run the ball down someone's throat. Or you go with that under center play action. And again, because it's coming from a condensed look, you can create space, you can create picks, you can create rubs, and it just presents so much fun schematically. Like, again, this Bills offense, I think, is, and I hate using this phrase, I think it gets used too much, but I think it's, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, or whatever that like phrase is. Like, again, individually on paper, I don't think they have this group that someone's looking at them and is like, oof, this is tough. That guy scares me. That guy scares me. That guy scares me. But if you look at it holistically, they have pieces that a good offensive coordinator, a good designer, and a good play caller and sequencer can take advantage. And then factoring in what the run game was last year. Where is it in my notes here? The Bills last year, 46% gap run rate, which was the third most, and then a 53% zone run rate, which was 30th. Teams, as we go forward, I think we'll see this even more in the coming years as we go forward from here, teams are going to start running more gap. But the Bills, because also for those who don't know, duo counts as a gap run. So the Bills last year, their bread and butter, running like weak side zone, weak side mid zone, duo, tackle wrap, all that stuff. And tackle wrap, that dart play, that's a gap run. Duo's a gap run. And then obviously they'd mix in like GT counter and outside zone and all that kind of stuff. But almost a 50-50 split with gap versus zone. They have that natural baked in versatility just from the running back run game already, which allows them to succeed. Like you can people move, but you also could get on the move and take advantage and kind of reach some guys and scoop some guys and get to the second level. That's one thing that concerns me a little bit about the change in offensive line, knowing that you don't have that consistency. You don't have Mitch Morse at center. Connor McGovern can move a little bit, but not like Mitch Morse, who you're going to find out in Jacksonville is one of the best movement dudes in football on the offensive line. Going to have some issues anchoring at times and with big body dudes trying to drive him into the backfield. But who he is on the run is tremendous. And then you're replacing McGovern with Edwards at left guard, who was that sixth offensive lineman last year. I think the nature of the run game changes a little bit, but I think they're still set up to run enough of a good balance between zone and gap. People move, have some athleticism baked in, and then maintain the depth of the pocket if you just straight up pass or if you go play action pass. And I just think this offense really is going to be mismatch based, condensed formations, power groupings, and heavier personnel, all with the idea of we're going to run the football, make you come out of those single high looks. If you stay in too high, fine. We're going to run the ball for 5 to 7 yards a pop. If you miss a tackle, James Cook is going to take one for 11 or 12 yards or maybe more. And then if you start to creep down, we're going to work in play action. Or even if you don't, we're going to look at the personnel you choose to match with. Okay, you don't respect Dalton Kincaid as a blocker. You want to stay in nickel. Okay, we can still pass against that, but we're going to bring in bigger bodied wide receivers and then we're going to run it down your throat. Okay, now you're going to match it with bigger bodied personnel. You're going to go with, like a big nickel. You're going to bring in a third linebacker or another safety. Cool. Can they cover? Probably not. We'll create that mismatch with Dalton Kincaid and or Dawson Knox and or Keon Coleman or MVS. All of these pieces, again, pushing different buttons, pulling different levers, which works for the Bills. And Brandon Beane talked about it. Again, some of this could just be GM speak with how the offseason went, but he talked about it after the draft of, kind of needing to evolve and change a little bit, getting younger, getting more athletic, and then evolving who they were a little bit. And this is why I don't think it's just GM speak, because it's such a far departure from what they've been. And it's also a risk. Like Josh Allen traditionally has succeeded with clear and defined separators. Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, those dudes who win early, they win often, who basically have like the airport orange vest and the cones that are like, I'm wide open, throw me the ball, give it to me. Dalton Kincaid is in that mold. Keon Coleman is not. MVS, not necessarily. Mac Hollins, not necessarily. Samuel's more of a gadget guy that you have to scheme open. Shakir can get open, but this group isn't necessarily a group of separators. It's more on the offensive coordinator to take advantage of those parts and make the sum greater than what it is. And that's why I think Brandon Beane was telling the truth. And especially when you pair it again with the top offenses we see in the NFL, it's good schematic offenses that are based around the foundation of having mismatch creators and mismatch pieces on their offense. And then that coordinator just knows which buttons to press and which levers to pull at the right time. And you kind of just let it go from there.
Yeah, and I think there are a few points that you made that I kind of was thinking about as you were talking. The first thing with the receivers accounting for in the run game. One of the funniest plays I remember from last season came from the divisional round when the Bills tried to run Stephon Diggs at running back. Love Stephon Diggs. That's not his game. But you replace Stephon Diggs with Curtis Samuel, who can do that.
Yes.
You now have a guy who can do those design, like, we're going to try and create matchup nightmares. You think about San Francisco and how many times they lined up Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. You can now do that with a guy like Curtis Samuel. Another thing that you brought up was where the biggest questions lie. And I think I wrote about it earlier this year when the Bills traded Stephon Diggs, that this is a bet on Joe Brady and Josh Allen. This is a bet on the development of Josh Allen and the amount of time that they have poured into making Josh Allen into what he is now. The reason the Chiefs were able to do what they did over the course of a year and a half is because Patrick Mahomes turned in a year and a half from the most dynamic downfield thrower possibly the game has ever seen to the most efficient underneath thrower the game has possibly ever seen. Now, this is the same bet on Josh Allen. Can he turn his game from, like you said, these defined separators to now it's on me processing. It's on me getting the ball into those underneath areas. And I think that's something that Josh Allen has grown in and has to continue his growth in, is just taking the underneath, taking the 5 to 6 yards. He's always going to want to get the ball downfield. Yep. That is just his nature of play. You cannot defang Josh Allen. That is what Josh Allen does. But you can be like, hey, man, it's okay to take this 6-yard choice route, Dalton Kincaid. It's okay to throw this under route to Curtis Samuel, because now that is what the offense is built upon. That it is built upon throwing those 6-yard routes and then the receivers turning it into 10. It's built on 3-yard routes turning into 5 or 8. It's those types of things where you make efficient offense by letting your playmakers make plays. It's less on you. And I think that's something that I think the Bills want to try and do, especially because I referenced it earlier when we were talking, but I believe it was 2022. It might have been 2021 or 2022 when Josh Allen got hurt early in the season and they didn't really
2022 against the Jets when Bryce Huff came around the corner and hit his elbow.
Yeah, they didn't really unleash Josh Allen until late in the season against Tampa when he was fully healthy. But now they sort of realize that now it's time for Josh to be playmaker, not in terms of, oh, I'm going to go get it myself. It's like it's like telling your star player, yeah, you might be able to go get a bucket, but you're getting doubled. You got to pass the ball. So somebody's going to be open. Somebody's going to be able to make the play, and you have to trust those guys to make the plays. I think it's also a bet on Joe Brady, because while I think Joe Brady's work in developing the run game of the Bills was really, really good, I think he still left some meat on the bone in the passing game.
Yes.
And you could tell because they just didn't throw the ball a lot. Like that is like, I think over the first 10 games of the season, Josh Allen threw the ball like 380 times. But then when Joe Brady came in, that number went down by like 150. Like they drastically changed that offense, but the marriage between the run and the pass still kind of lacked. So I think in the offseason, especially going into this season, I think this is a bet on Joe Brady, because you want to try and help merge that game, merge your two offenses together. At some points during the season when Joe Brady was coordinated, it felt like they were running two completely different offenses. Like the offense that you saw against the Cowboys was a lot different from the offense that you saw against the Dolphins in week 18. And of course, game plans vary from team to team and week over week, but such a drastic difference feels very disjointed. So I think where Joe Brady can develop is kind of working on that in-between game, working on merging the run and the pass. Last year, the Bills, according to Pro Football Reference, finished, I think, 22nd in true like play action passing attempts. And I think that's a number that's probably going to go up with like you said, losing Mitch Morse hurts, but you can mask losing Mitch Morse by running play action. That's a way to kind of get those attacking defenses that they're going to play. I mean, playing the Jets twice a year, you want to defang that defensive line that's coming at you every single play by running play action, slow them down. And you do that by using play action. Of course, like I always say, play action and motion is not an instant get rich quick scheme. It is not it's not the rebuff that you get in RPG games where you drink it and then you instantly become 100%. Nice. This is not Link crushing the pots. Nice. That's not what this is. But it is a way to help give your quarterback a wider margin for error.
Yes.
And I think for the longest, I think the Bills have kind of towed the line between Josh, save us, and hey, let's help you out a little bit.
Good point.
And now I think they should kind of lean more towards, we're going to help you out a little bit. We're going to run the ball a little bit more. We're going to try and be better at running the football so you don't have to carry as much weight as a runner and a passer. So you can finally kind of grow into a full-fledged, like this is, best quarterback in the NFL. And that's something where I think, like I said, this season is going to hinge on Joe Brady's development as a play caller, and not in just pure design of the offense, but sequencing.
Yes.
I think that's something that's lost a lot when we talk about play callers. It's not just calling cool plays. If it was just about calling cool plays, Cliff Kingsbury would be hot shit. But he's not, because it's about when you call them and how you call them. Well, not how you call them. I don't mean like that. But
yeah, but how you get to them, how you disguise them. Like everybody runs dagger and everybody runs sail, but how do you get to it? How do you dress it up? How do you disguise it? What wrinkles do you add? Because again, going to our cyclical conversation, nothing is new. Everything is the same. Everybody runs the same stuff, but how do you dress it up? And to your point, when do you call it? It's that sequencing. And I think that's what Brady did well last year with the sequencing and the layering. And I think what's interesting, to go to your point as well, is him having a full offseason to install his offense, not add his tweaks to the Ken Dorsey offense, but have his offense. And I think what's interesting, again, going in conjunction with your point, is you saying it's them betting on Brady and Allen by extension, but I really do think it is a large bet on Brady, or them leaning into that more so than Allen, because of the change in body types and what they're looking for in the room, trading away Stephon Diggs, moving away from more pure and declarative separators and going with a bigger bodied element. Now, it could just be the natural evolution of where they think football needs to go and where they think their offense needs to go, like we've talked about. But I do think, to your point, it is a bet on Brady. And I think that's very interesting when paired with this being the offseason to really fully install what his offense will be.
Yeah, and I think something that I think the Bills can really benefit from, but I also think like every NFL team can benefit from, especially the Eagles, is getting more pistol involved in their
Bro, I
offense.
say it all the time. Pistol,
I
like that's an
love
evergreen
football
tweet.
offense.
It's the best. You're talking about marrying. You've said that word so much. You're marrying shotgun and under center stuff. It still gives you, it opens up the menu for everything. I tweet at least once a month in season, the Bills should use more pistol. The Bills should use more pistol. It's like an evergreen tweet for me every year, every month.
Because even with pistol, you can get into those gap scheme runs,
Yes.
but you also mitigate the amount of strain you put on your running back and his vision. You know,
Yes.
you're not asking the running back to immediately get the ball and kind of just dance around in shotgun and
You
find
can
the
give
range.
him that track, and you can give him that opportunity to survey and poke and plot or explode right away and hit what you need to. Yeah, you give.
Yeah, you
Yes.
think about the Ravens. The Ravens used a lot of pistol because they had that threat as a runner and they had that threat as a quarterback. Where you can marry the run game with attacking downfield in the passing game. I think that's something the Bills can definitely benefit from. I don't think Joe Brady is going to use it as much. I think they're going to strictly remain kind of shotgunny. But I do think, like I said, the marriage between run and pass is going to have to improve because, I mean, unless the new guys on the offensive line become the greatest offensive line known to man, and you can just beat the crap out of teams for 70 plays a game. If that happens, I think I'd make the Bills like my favorite offense to watch. If they just run power and
I
counter
would love
for
that.
70 plays a game, that'd rock.
I would
But
love that.
I think the marriage between the run and the pass is going to have to improve. And I think for Josh Allen, it is taking those underneath routes where I think he improved on it even last year, where
Yeah.
in order to get to B, you got to get to A. You get from A to B. You can't just skip to B. It's like doing a math problem. You can't just skip to the answer. My mom would always tell me, you can't just skip to the answer. You got to go through the process. You know, you got to get from A to B, then B to C. And I think that's where Josh Allen is starting to continue to improve and where he's already shown a drastic amount of improvement. But it's going to be much more important this year because he doesn't have the defined separators. He doesn't have the easy button of Stephon Diggs stop route. You know, they don't have that easy button anymore. So finding their easy buttons is going to be critical going into the season.
I like that a lot. And, for as much as this offense has been, relying, like, okay, to your point, like that kind of getting that caught in that in between of, all right, we need to rely on Josh Allen to be a unicorn, and we got to get him some help and take it off his plate. The kind of like that, do we not, do we not, and sitting on the fence. I think Diggs fell into that as well, because it was like, when push comes to shove, all right, Diggs is going to beat somebody on the outside and we're going to go to Stephon Diggs. Like, whether it was by design or whether it was Allen knowing that, like even last year when teams were kind of seeing the predictable nature of the Bills and what Diggs was going to do because of what the play calling was, teams are like knowing, okay, we know Denver's a great example. It wasn't Surtain, it was the other corner on the other side. It's like a third down, and the corner is just hard inside leverage, knowing that Diggs is going to run a slant. And Diggs still finds a way to get him to work up field and then cross his face and get inside on the slant and get open and make a catch for a first down. And to your point, now you don't have, I don't think you're going to have this offense that's all on Allen or all on Diggs, because this offense, and I love that phrasing to get a bucket. Again, I use it so much. And it applies so well to this offense. Like, I don't think this offense is not built for like, oh, you got these dudes who can go get a bucket and you can play iso ball and do whatever. Like, this offense is built around Allen, who's a very good player. But to your point, now he's going to see those double teams and teams are going to try and trap him. So can he get the ball out, and can someone else make a shot? Can someone dribble drive? Can someone, create their own shot? Or are you creating space for everyone by, granted, with the Warriors offense, when they were cooking under Curry years ago, like, they had dudes who could, get a bucket seemingly at will, but they had such great off-ball movement. I just think of everything they were doing to get Steph Curry open, and all the screens and off-ball movement and like zigging and zagging along the baseline and everything. Like, so you had dudes who could get a bucket, but even if they didn't, Steve Kerr was so adept at getting dudes open by creating so much chaos that allowed them to get open. So can Joe Brady be that? Can Joe Brady create that space? And I like the point you mentioned about, the under center and shotgun stuff. I want pistol so bad. The Bills rate last year in
pistol offense,
bro. It just works. It marries everything. Like, and especially with Josh Allen, who is very good at being a magician with the ball and hiding it when he turns his back to the defense. You get that with pistol. And you get the downhill. You can still go wide zone and do stuff. You can still get downhill and run duo and inside zone and all this stuff. You can run everything from a pass and run perspective out of it, while also helping your running back visually with his track, instead of just having to be in a shotgun. Because people don't talk about that enough. Like, being able to like line up in a single back look or like dot that eye and being able to come downhill versus being in the shotgun and having to sidestep and grab it this way with no momentum and then get going. Like, that's a different type of pacing. It's a different type of connection mentally and physically. The pistol helps merge that. I really want some of that. The Bills last year had a 73% shotgun rate. In the Joe Brady offense from week 11 on through the rest of the regular season, they had a 70% shotgun rate. So not much changed overall there. Not much change with motion either. And what I'm also interested to see, overall in the year last year, a 16% play action rate for the Buffalo Bills. Just under Joe Brady, also a 16% play action rate. That on the season was ranked 14th, but they had a 19% RPO rate on the year, which was the third most. And under Joe Brady, they had a 20% RPO rate, which was the fourth most. And I wonder how much I think RPOs have to get factored into the play action conversation, even though they're not play action, but just that notion of trying to game up the defense a little bit. I would like to see them move away from RPOs, because of, even though if you hit on an RPO the way you should, defenses have no answer. Like, you are able to have the trump card no matter what. But defenses can also dictate to you by forcing your hand, by forcing you to hand the ball off or forcing you to pass it. I would like to see more traditional play action for the Bills offense instead of RPOs, and specifically under center play action or pistol play action if they want.
Hey, look, you can do it. You can do it with pistol. You got the best of both worlds. But I think the RPO point is really interesting, because I think defenses now are geared to defend RPOs. Like, yeah, you'll play too high and force teams to pass the ball, or force teams to pass the ball out of those RPOs. But that's all well and good until the safety is hitting you like Goldberg over the middle on a glance route. And then you're like, dang, I don't want to send my receiver over the middle again, because that safety is sitting right there. Now you have teams that are just going to sit in that glance zone, and it takes away the responsibility of the linebacker in the passing game. That's why playing those light boxes is so prevalent nowadays, because you take away the responsibility of a linebacker in coverage and let him be a run-only player. You let him, okay, if it's an RPO, you just got to run, because your zone is being taken up by a safety who's coming off the roof. You change that with hard play action, because even though that safety is coming off the roof, he still has to have his quarter. He still has to have that quarter's coverage. So what are you going to do in that point? So I think getting more under center or getting more hard play action is going to especially help. I think turning the RPOs, this is the biggest thing that the Chiefs did, was turning the RPOs into just runs.
Yes.
It's just take out
and to connect to your previous point, the Bills did that in that game against the Bucks, that regular season game in the second half. Instead of just those RPO looks just became true run it type of runs, and it changed the complexion of that game.
Yeah, even against Dallas, those RPO looks were just runs. If teams are going to continue to play light boxes at you, and you have a run game like the Bills and a +1 quarterback and guys who can win after the catch or in the backfield, just run at them until they quit. It's not the sexiest. It's not the most fun. It probably won't get the most efficiency points.
But it's math. It's numbers. Like if you have that numbers advantage, do it. And then again, if you're playing Dallas and you have the numbers advantage and the size advantage because they have a 205-pound linebacker,
linebackers, like I'll never forget Mark Helfrich when he was at Oregon talked about his offense one day on College Game Day. He was like, "It's just numbers. If there's 6 in the box, we're gonna run it. If there's 7 in the box, we'll throw it. It makes the offense simple. And you play faster when you play simple." So I think getting into that designed run game, that designated run game, not even turning Josh Allen into like 20 carries a game or like not even 15, but like having, like I said earlier, pull on a zone read, run those counter bashes. Even again, not advocating for RPOs. You will never hear me advocate for RPOs. Stick draw. They did against the Eagles. Just run stick draw. It's insane in the red zone when you have Josh Allen because you have the numbers advantage. So now it's about, like I said, finding the easy buttons for the Bills offense, and how they go about finding that easy button is going to be interesting to watch throughout the season.
Yes. Well said. You mentioned in that Oregon piece, and I was thinking back to, I think I was watching a Rich Rodriguez coaching clinic when he was at Arizona, and I forget, he had such a clever way of saying it, but like he was going over their rules for offense, and it was literally just like, if there's this many in the box or less, we're running it every single time. Like, and there would, like, he dressed it up with like a catchy phrase or something, but it was literally that. Like, if there's this many or less, we're running it every single time. And that's what it is. Like, offense is math. And then defense is geometry, because it's about spacing and it's about leverage and all those pieces. And that's what I think is so good. What's annoyed me so much about the Bills offense in previous years is because they had that passing threat, they had that math advantage in the box so much, where there was only, 6 dudes in the box, or sometimes 5, and they'd have a body on a body or a hat on a hat, or they'd have, the tight end attached to the formation. It was 6 on 6, and they'd be like, run the ball. Like, you have a hat on a hat, or you have a gap advantage, or even if they have 7 in the box and you only have 6 blockers, cool, hand it off and do something with Josh Allen and hold that backside edge, and or maybe even that backside linebacker because of the threat. And now you've just removed 2 from it, which they did a little bit against Dallas as well, which added to that tackle wrap dart piece. They have the opportunity to win with math because of Josh Allen or just their run game in general. And I hope now, with the bodies that they have from a pass catching standpoint in the tight end room and receiver room, I hope they also can win schematically. And that just, to your point, like, that marriages everything. That brings everything together. That melds it all together, because if you can get an offense that is diverse in the run game from a gap and zone perspective, but then also has a run game to pair with a pass game where it truly connects, similar to Jeff Stoutland, the Eagles offensive line coach. I was watching a coaching clinic with him last offseason, and he said this thing that it was so simple, but every pass that they have, like their under center like passes, they've got all of their under center runs, they've got a play action that mirrors it, like, exactly. So everything just to confuse defenses. And I think of that so much because now the Bills can, like, lean into that type of world because of the bodies that they have and the formations and alignments that they can have. So now you can have a diverse run game, but then you can have a run game and a pass game where the two mirror each other, where you don't know if the runner pass is coming until you see declaratively where the ball is, which isn't the easiest thing. And now you're playing with defenders' eyes and they're processing and you're sucking dudes up and hitting behind them, or you're making them hesitate a little bit and you're giving an extra quarter or half of a second for James Cook to get on your toes and get 5 or 6 yards when he should have only gotten 3. All of these pieces start to add together. And I think that's what's exciting for this offense, for as worrisome as it is of you change the offensive line. Granted, McGovern is still there, but you have changed 2 out of the 5 starters from last year after you finally got consistency and good offensive line play for the first time really in Josh Allen's tenure. You had this offensive line that could function in the run and the pass. You change that, then you ship out Stephon Diggs. And regardless of what everybody thinks about Diggs and or Gabe Davis or Sherfield, Hardy, whatever, you completely revamped the wide receiver room. You've changed the offensive line, again, 2 out of those 5 positions. And then you have a new coordinator. And then you look at the bodies that were replacing guys, and it gets a little scary because you're thinking, like, again, even if people think Diggs is washed, which I'm going to say right now he's not, and I know everybody hates him or thinks he's terrible. I don't, but that's a conversation for another time. You look on paper and it's like, man, this Bills team got worse offensively. But I think if Brady hits, and to your point, if the betting on Joe Brady pays dividends like they think it should, this offense can come out cleaner on the other side, despite not being as good on paper, despite not being as sexy, because they have the opportunity to go back to kind of just, not that it's simple, but like simplistic football, which is run the football, be diverse in your run game, and build your pass game off of that with mismatches that you have in your pass catching rooms. And that's it. Like, if you have the schematic person to take advantage of it with design and with sequencing, like, this offense can really go. I think that's a big if, but if it clicks, it could be really, really, really fun.
Yeah. And another question I have is going to be kind of short, but it's how much motion. And again, motion is not a magical panacea that's going to instantly make your offense into the greatest show on turf. But using it not only will help your quarterback, but it'll help your receivers out a lot. You don't have to always put them in isolated situations. According to Seth Walder, who does great work at ESPN on tracking motion rates over the NFL, in terms of motion at the snap, the Bills were 27th in the NFL last year. That works because you have Stephon Diggs, who can win in isolation points.
Yes.
He can win in isolation.
Get you a bucket.
You don't have that anymore. So I wonder if that motion rate goes up because of guys like Curtis Samuel, who are always going to be in motion, Khalil Shakir, who goes in motion a lot, Keon Coleman, who can be used in those situations. And not only that, but also tying into your point about condensed tight splits, you can create those tight splits by bringing a guy in or pushing a guy out, like we saw everybody and their grandmother do last year.
Fast motion, tear motion, whatever the hell you want to call it.
I think Kyle Shanahan called it cheat motion. We'll call it cheat motion. Cheat motion. How Joe Brady ties that in, it's just building layers on offense. Sean McVay and the Rams don't run a lot of. They truly don't run a lot of plays. I think Sean McVay has said they don't run a lot of plays. They have a lot of formations and a lot of tags and a lot of motions that make everything look different despite the bones of it being the same. So how Joe Brady goes about creating the illusion of what's the word? I can't believe I'm blanking on it.
I want to help, but I don't know where the thought is going, so I'm just gonna start yelling random words.
Creating the illusion of diversity in the passing game.
Nice. Okay.
You don't have to always run like these crazy different formations or not formations, or these crazy different plays or passing concepts.
Just dress it up differently.
Yeah, it just make it look different.
The presentation.
And I think that's something where I think Joe Brady can improve, like we saw last year. Like the presentation of it. I think, again, a critical point for this Bills team was the Cowboys game, where they used motion to kind of dress everything up and look the same, but it was something different. So, in short, I know I was going to be short with this, but yeah, using motion not as an instant boost to the offense or like the whole backbone of the thing, because as good as motion is, you can also turn into Matt Canada. But
Quarterback Canada.
using it to help your receivers who don't
Yeah.
necessarily win in isolated spots anymore is going to be huge.
And I also think even using that motion and or just shifts to potentially help ID coverages for Josh Allen and make his life easier, especially in this world with I like the idea of using motion and just helping to him ID, like, okay, we got man coverage or we got, zone. Just like literally as simple. And that sounds so simple and straightforward. But if you have this run-centric offense or this power run game, does it pull a defender from the box straight up? Are you pulling a linebacker out? Like, and again, that even creates another advantage, right? Say you're in this spread and you've got Allen in the backfield with Cook and you motion Cook out of the backfield. Does a linebacker go with him? Cool. Not only do you have that identifier that it's probably man coverage, but you also just pulled a regular run defender from the box. Now, what does that numbers look like for Josh Allen in the run game? And do we just change it and it's a QB draw, or we just run some QB power out of like a spread look? Like all these potential benefits from the motion. And I think that's another aspect. And I like that you went to that part of the conversation because I think that goes hand in hand with a lot of what we're saying. Like I don't want to make it seem like the Bills need to use all these trick plays and do all this stuff, but I really think the Bills need to do whatever they can to game up defenses because I don't think they strictly have the one-on-one talent that's just going out and getting a bucket. That's just winning an ISO ball. So you have to use alignments, personnel, formations, motion, the run game, play action, some gadgetry stuff. Again, putting Curtis Samuel in the backfield and legitimately handing the ball off to him or sending him out of the backfield on a Texas route or an angle route and, having the numbers advantage and using some smoke screens or having a one-on-one opportunity to Keon Coleman and being like, hey, their outside corner on you is like 5'10 and 194 pounds. We're just going to throw this ball up and you better dunk on him like Sean Kemp for the Seattle Sonics. Like that's what you need to do. And they have to be able to work all these buttons because to your point, it's not just, I talked about all these offenses earlier and these guys and, the Final Four teams last year and the Niners, the Lions, the Ravens, the Chiefs, and how they leaned into certain personnel groupings to take advantages and have mismatches, which is true, but they also just have really good football players in a vacuum, like Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and McCaffrey. And again, with the Lions, like there is no Amon-Ra St. Brown on this team. Maybe they have a Sam Laporta on this team, although I think Kincaid and Laporta are two different type of dudes. But you look at the individual players that existed on those teams, and you've got true one-on-one bucket getters, ball winners type of stuff. I don't think the Bills necessarily have that. I think if the season goes right this time next year, I think Dalton Kincaid can be talked about as potentially one of like the premier or on the cusp premier players in the league, just based off the position he plays, his skill set, and how much I think Allen's going to go to him. Like you said at the very beginning, he's the tip of the spear. I've been using similar verbiage throughout this offseason. Like once they drafted Coleman, this offense is going to funnel through Dalton Kincaid. And so I think next year at this time, we could be having the conversation of being like, okay, they've got Allen and they've got Kincaid. Let's see what everything else is, yada, yada. But I don't know if they necessarily have that with anyone else. Like I think Khalil Shakir is a nice piece and maybe he elevates further, but I think we know what Curtis Samuel is. I think Keon Coleman's going to take a couple years to kind of develop from a refinement and precision standpoint. But again, all of these guys have buttons that can be pressed that work. It's just really going to be on Joe Brady to push those buttons. And within that vein and kind of within that notion, us talking about this Kansas City-esque-ish renovation to the offense, funneling in with the larger trends we're seeing with some of the top offenses in the league in terms of mismatch creation, running the ball, condensed formations, this whole conversation schematically, personnel, alignment, formations, all that kind of stuff. Do you think it works for the Bills in 2024? And do you think if it does, this is them, do they stay the course and lean into it harder? Do you think it's a 1-year pivot or test as they try to course correct financially? Kind of looking at that crystal ball a little bit and kind of what do you see for 2024 and beyond, given the shift that we're prognosticating here?
So I think it works because Josh Allen is phenomenal. That if you have Josh Allen as your quarterback, an offense will work. I think it's going to take a little time. I think it's going to look a little rough to start the season just because you're playing young guys out there at receiver. You don't have those easy buttons, like we said. So maybe there's a little bit more leaning on the run game. There's leaning more on Kincaid, who was a second-year player, who now all of a sudden becomes the vet in the skill position room of a guy who knows what the offense is. And you think about a guy like Khalil Shakir, who now becomes that elder statesman in the room.
I was gonna say he's the most tenured like wide receiver in the wide receiver room right now.
Yeah, so he becomes the vet. But I think as the young guys grow around Josh Allen, you will see that offense start to blossom late in the season. We said it last year with Kansas City. Even this year at Kansas City, it's going to take a little time because you needed to build it back up. But once it got going, You could tell what it was. So now with the Bills, like I said, I think it works, but expecting instant fireworks can be a little bit of a stretch for the Bills. I'd say around like week 8 is when this offense is really going to start to kick into high gear.
Fair. I think so much of it hinges on who Dalton Kincaid is this year, who Keon Coleman is this year, and or just who from the bigger bodied wide receivers is able to kind of stake their claim. Because again, we know what Curtis Samuel is. And I think we have a good idea of who Khalil and what Khalil Shakir is. And I say those things positively. But I think for this offense to truly get unlocked, those bigger bodied wide receivers have to play their role. So that's what I think kind of puts things into pause or a little bit of neutral for me. How far along is Keon Coleman? How effective can Matt Collins be? How effective can MVS be? Because I think those bigger body dudes in conjunction with Kincaid and Knox, like so much of this conversation really starts to open things up and expand. I think for an early part of this year, the offense, to your point, is like, I think it's not going to be sexy. I think it's going to be a lot of Dalton Kincaid on option routes and maybe some chunk plays downfield. I think it's going to be a lot of Dalton Kincaid and a lot of running the football in as non-sexy of a fashion. Like, I think this Bills offense can put up points, but I think it's going to be, I've joked for so long that I've wanted the Bills to become this power running team who generates explosives from play action. And I think this offense is becoming really close to that joke that I've been making for the past couple of years. Because with how Allen succeeds, Allen and most quarterbacks are good off of play action, especially under center. But I think under center play action gets Allen into a rhythm mechanically that allows him to succeed when he's throwing the ball downfield or attacking in the intermediate. And when granted, you don't have to have play action or you don't have to have a good run game to have a good play action game or successful play action game. But if you do, it helps. And the Bills' run game is so good. I really think we get kind of, again, I know McVay's offense and what he does is more of a new age take, but I really think we get back to kind of just old schoolish kind of football, which is run the football, push dudes off the line and create displacement, control the ball, get physical, and then you go with play action and strength from there and kind of generate your explosives that way. Because you have MBS who can get downfield. You have Curtis Samuel, who's fast, but I don't think he plays as fast as 4.31 time. Shakir can get downfield, but isn't necessarily a burner. You don't have all this true vertical threat speed throughout your lineup. You have some dudes that can work down there, but I think to really attack and generate explosives, it's either going to come through yards after catch or from a play action perspective and or even from the run. We talked about motion and what it can do from a coverage identification perspective or, giving you advantages in the pass game. You also can use it in the run, throwing MVS in motion or Keon Coleman in motion and using him as the lead blocker and like running a toss to Cook or running some zone to that side and allowing him to crack on someone or drive somebody out. They can do so much from a leverage perspective in the pass and the run, in addition to the mismatch game, that I think this offense, while again, not sexy on paper, I think they're going to be a fun film study this year, watching them week in and week out, seeing what Brady is doing, and I think this is another one. I tweeted earlier today that I think Trevor Lawrence is one of the best litmus tests for people who watch tape versus don't, because the people who don't watch tape speak about Trevor Lawrence in a completely different manner than the people who do watch tape. I think the Bills' offense is going to be in a similar vein in terms of that litmus test, in terms of seeing what they are potentially from a numbers perspective or from a raw stats perspective versus what they're doing on film, and then seeing their evolution and their progression week to week, because again, so much of it is going to depend on pushing those buttons and pulling those levers in the run and the pass and in the mismatch area. And again, it's going to go super forward. Like if Joe Brady hits with this offense the way he could, is he even here next year? Does somebody see that and be like, man, look what he got out of all these dudes that aren't sexy on paper. I want to make him my next head coach. Like, teams are always looking for that. Like, there's so many dominoes that could result from this. But just in a vacuum, I think the film study week in and week out is going to be real fun with this offense.
Yeah, this is like when Chris Jericho went from using the lion salt as his finisher in like WCW to truly using the walls of Jericho and the code breaker when he got to the
I hated the code breaker. I love the walls and I love the lion salt. The code breaker pissed me off.
It's such a pro wrestling move.
It
or
is.
Like pro wrestling has a bunch of moves where like, I don't think that could really work in real life, but I'm gonna roll with it. The code breaker is one of those moves. But what I mean by that is you're going from this high flying, high risk, high reward offense to a bit more ground game, a little bit more like we're gonna suffocate you offensively.
Literally, like, less, all jokes aside, like less cruiserweight Chris Jericho and more like intercontinental champion type of Chris Jericho.
Yeah, like this is getting into we're going to try and make this offense, like I said, it's going to be sustainable. I think this Bills offense isn't going to be sexy. He's not going to put up a whole lot of they're not going to lead the league in scoring, especially early. No. But I think it's going to be sustainable and it's going to grow as these young guys grow during the season, which again is the bet and the KC-ification they're doing of this offense, because Kansas City allowed their offense to grow over the last 2 seasons, especially after trading away Tyreek Hill. This is what the Bills are trying to do. They're trying to allow those young guys to grow. They will figure it out as the season goes along, and you're able to do that because your quarterback gives you such a wide margin for error. And I think that's where the Bills will operate, especially in the first half of the season. But then, like I said, around week 8, you'll start to see, especially in the beginning of the season, you'll see the vision for what they're trying to do. You'll see the foundation. The results might not match up with the process, but you'll like the process. Yes. But then as the results start to match with the process, then you'll start to see it start to click. Because playing in the NFL is hard. Yeah. Being a rookie starter in the NFL is hard. Like, that's a really difficult thing to do, going from frying pan into the fire, especially for a team like the Bills, who are seen as Super Bowl contenders and getting the best from every opponent and very good opponents, especially early. So it's going to look a little rough to start, but I think as the season goes along, you'll start to see his offense really take off.
I like that. And I think that's well said. And that fits into my, why I think they're going to be such a fun film study and why I think they're going to be like in that litmus test, like Trevor Lawrence is, because watching them early on, I think you're going to be able to see like, oh, like to your point, I see what the vision is. I see what they're going for. The end result isn't what they wanted it to be. But if they keep along this pace, like that end result will be there. And if they can tread water enough and maintain, I really do think this is an offense that when you're talking about them in November and December, it's like, wow, like we could see the rumblings of who they were going to be in September and October. And now here we are in November and December, and things are starting to come to fruition. And even if it doesn't necessarily happen by week 8 or as early as you'd like, you could do a lot worse than an athletic, strong-armed QB and a good run game. And that's it. And I think another wild card within all this, which we will not be getting into right now, is pairing it with the defense and what the defense looks like, given all the wholesale changes on that side of the ball and how these two things pair together. But yeah, this offense is going to be an interesting case study. Again, I mentioned it in the intro, like the changing nature of defenses, the 2 high coverages and nickel and all that stuff that we talked about so much. Like, it was put in mind to like stop offenses like the Bills and like the Chiefs. And then, you had to, trying to stop, okay, we're pivoting because we're trying to stop the Shanahans and the McVays. And then it was, okay, now we're trying to stop what Mahomes is doing and what Allen is doing. And so the Bills, while in themselves have their specific response, who they are is really part of the current trend we're seeing in NFL football, offensively and defensively. And it makes for a really fun conversation. And this conversation was, I haven't really even checked the timer, and I had no idea that it's already almost 11, and I've kept you for an hour and 49 minutes. I say this to you every time, and I kind of hope you just expected this point, but I apologize for keeping you so long. But just in case you got some more stuff to say, anything you got left in the chamber that you want to get out right now? The Bills, wholesale stuff, league-wide stuff, anything that you haven't gotten to speak on. If you don't, that's fine too as well. But anything you got left in the chamber, feel free to go for it.
Over the past couple of seasons at SB Nation, I wrote 2 stories, one about the revival of the run game, and then the other about motion in the NFL. I feel like both of those are going to start to make their wholesale return to the NFL in 2024, just because of, again, how light teams have played defensively and how much bigger teams are getting up front. Like I said, the Rams have gotten big up front. Think about how many linemen went in the first round of the NFL draft. Linemen are a hot commodity because
look at the guard market. Guards are getting paid like tackles now.
Yeah, the Panthers paid, I think, like what, $200 million to 2 guards because
crazy money.
Again, it is just a fact of life. You don't find a lot of 6'4", 320-pound people walking around and say, hey, you want to come play in the NFL? The ones that are playing on a different team. You don't just find those guys on the street. So those people are coming hot commodities, and it's a telltale sign that teams want to get at you in the run game. It is 2006 all over again. I wouldn't know what that's like because I was 6 years old, but it's 2006 all over again.
I love it. It just makes sense. Like, you look at that, the nature of all of it, like, oh man, offenses are passing the ball a ton and they're going spread. Oh man, like our dudes up front, especially on the interior, are too slow and they're not getting the QB. So let's get leaner up front. Let's become more of a one gap penetrating type of like interior to get after the quarterback. And then if you're an offense, you're like, crap, these dudes on the inside are just so fast and so quick. Why don't we get bigger on the interior and just mash the hell out of them and blow them out of the water when it comes to, the run game? And then, hey, they're built to stop the pass. Let's just run the football. And that's what's so fun about the swinging of the pendulum back and forth, because no matter what, defenses will take it from the offense. Then the offense is going to take it back. Defenses will adjust and take it. And then we just keep going back and forth. It's just a matter of how many years or how intense the control is for that pendulum offensively and defensively. And yeah, it's a fun time in the league as we, I think we're on the precipice of offenses starting to have the answers for what defenses have done, because defenses have been limiting explosives for the past couple of years. It really started to come to a head in 2023. I think we're really starting to get to the point where, again, offenses are going to go 11 personnel and like spread passing isn't going to go away. But I think with each consecutive year, you're going to see heavier personnel, more condensed formations, more emphasis on the run game. And so I think we're on the precipice of offenses snatching that pendulum back, which means we're also on the precipice of defenses having to figure out another way. And then we're going to go back to, I don't know, like the early 90s and mid-90s Steelers where they had Levon Kirkland at linebacker who was like 300 pounds. And that's what we're going to see for football. And it's just going to be round and round we go on this circle.
Hey, look, Jeremiah Trotter Sr. was 260 pounds when he was drafted. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. was like 225. That is the most telling thing about the cyclical nature of football. I truly cannot wait until we return to the triple option. That will be when I enjoy football the most.
Give it to me. And I honestly, when NCAA comes out, I want to run triple options. So I'm just going to lead so hard into 1940s football.
The Jamie Chadwell Liberty pistol triple option is my favorite offense in football. I'll either be running that, or I will just go full on North Dakota State or Utah, and I'm running duo at your face.
I love it. I love that so much. I have a conversation with myself every day of what college I'm going to pick and where. I need to have weather involved. I need to have snow games come November and December. I usually like a team that plays in a conference that has a championship game, so that influences, but I don't want to be a good team. I want to take someone and build them from nothing. in my FC24 franchise, like I'm looting town. Like that's the type of vibe that I'm on and what I go for. So, oh man, I'm so Steve comes in and says the wing tee. Yeah, like I just want to go super old school.
Come on, let's bring back the wing tee. I already know I'm playing in South Alabama. Beautiful stadium we got down there in Mobile. 5 minutes from a cookout. They're an hour from the beach. That's going to be. I'm turning South Alabama into the most prominent Southern football team that the world has ever seen. And it's going to be by running the ball 60 times a game.
I like it. And start taking everybody from that SEC pipeline and bring them all to South Alabama instead of Tuscaloosa and Georgia and everything. I like it. Oh man. Oh, this is funny from Rav said pizza, wings, and beer is the best triple option. I like where
look, as long as you run in the triple. As long as you run in the triple.
Whatever your triple is, it's fine. You just need a triple option.
Pizza as the dive man. Come on, that's real football right there.
This is back when we were a proper country. Right. Oh, you had one of my favorite tweets ever, and I think it blew up for you back during the season. I think like Army ran some like spread passing touchdown.
Yeah, it was like Y cross or something. I'm like, what happened to football? What happened to us? Like what?
I knew it was you tweeted it, and I commented on it like 3 or 4 minutes in. And I just did some generic comment of like, we used to be a proper country or like something like that. And I knew your tweet blew up because I looked at my phone like an hour later and my comment had like 300 likes. And I was like, what is going on? And then I went to your tweet and your tweet was at like 1.5 thousand likes. And it was just but it was so spot on. And that's what we need to be. Back to the triple option and the wing tee. Like we're just going Paul Brown type of offense. South Alabama, whoever I'm going to be, I don't know. Man, I could sit and talk to you for forever. I think we always go long because, well, at least I hope the conversation is fun and engaging for you and myself. This was awesome. I know the chat liked it. I'm going to remove the banner that shows who you are and your Twitter handle and anything and everything. The floor is yours. You've already plugged some of your work, which is genuinely tremendous. If you folks have not read JP stuff on SB Nation, it's really how I got accustomed to his work in addition to the Twitter stuff. Like you are one of the best follows on Twitter from an engagement and an entertaining perspective. Granted, a lot of the things you like are sports and wrestling and anime, which is all up my alley, but the way you attack the game and break down the game in the written form on shows, on Twitter, you just absolutely crush it. I genuinely think you're one of the best follows on Twitter, not just for in general, but especially for football. Tell everybody who they are, what you do, where they can find you. The floor is yours. Anything and everything you got, shoot your shot.
Of course, I'm JP Acosta. You can find me at SB Nation, where I've been told I'm the only person who can write in-depth football stories in the same week as writing about comparing NBA players to anime characters and writing about rap beefs and how to connect that to sports. I have a couple of fun stories hopefully coming out this week. One of them is going to be a bit more in-depth, talking about football. The other one, I am interviewing my brother about who would win a basketball game, U2 or LeBron James. So be on the lookout for those things, but just follow along, see what I'm doing.
I love that. That's like the best. That is, if ever there was a microcosm or like encapsulation of like who you are and what you do, that nailed it. I'm going to DM you shortly after I close up shop here with this episode and apologize to you profusely for keeping you for too long, but I enjoyed the hell out of this conversation. You crushed it. You were on the forefront of my brain with having it, and this was everything that I hoped it would be. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night, all 58 minutes of it, because we're at 11:02 Eastern PM right now. I appreciate the hell out of you. Godspeed, and I'll see you in the Twitterverse.
Thanks for having me.
Later, man. Absolutely tremendous. I love JP. Every time he's able to come on the show, we engage on Twitter a bunch and interact there, but he truly is absolutely tremendous. I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks, because I think we're going to wind down here on this episode. If you have not already, please, 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 thank you, drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So if you are watching on YouTube, please, 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 thank you, drop a like on this video. Also, for you folks, if you live in the Buffalo area, get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Genuinely the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, a great cheese to sauce ratio. The crust is good. The dough is good. It's not too, you can get well done if you want, but it's just a good consistency. They make their own homemade blue cheese. They have catering options. They have breakfast pizza. They just crush everything and anything when it comes to food and when it comes to the pizza game. They also do a lot of good for the community with their initiatives and drives, partnering with Roswell, the SPCA, Toys for Tots, the Alzheimer's Foundation. They do a lot of good and great stuff for Buffalo, aside from just providing great food. So go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Again, throwing up that banner as we start to wind down here. Appreciate all the kind words coming through in the chat. Greatly appreciate that. Again, drop a like if you are here on YouTube. Please turn on notifications for the Disguise Coverage playlist and subscribe to the Cover One channel as a whole. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool as well. Please rate and review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and or Spotify. Reviews and subscriptions are tremendously, tremendously helpful. Especially if it's genuine feedback, but even if not, I'll take, a good 5-star review and a like and all that kind of stuff. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about this show and about how awesome it is. If you thought this show was terrible, tell your enemies about it and try and make them watch this show and ruin their day with it. I appreciate everybody who tuned in live. I know we're starting to get into the dead time of the off season, so thank you very much to all the live viewers who tuned in, the engagement with each other, with the engagement with myself and JP. Thank you for the kind words for myself and for JP. Thank you very much to Mr. JP Acosta for riding with me nearly an entire full 2 hours on this episode. Honestly, we probably could have gone even longer with this conversation. There's so much to it, but I hope we gave you folks the in-depth and detailed look at this Bills offense within the larger backdrop and frame of the conversation when it comes to the league-wide trends offensively and defensively and where the game of football is going and how the Bills fit into that in 2024 and beyond. Thank you for everyone who tuned in live or post-live. Please rate and review and subscribe, drop likes, all that kind of stuff. Sal got it right in the comments. The blueberries are always right every single time. Equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I appreciate anyone and everyone who watched this episode live, post-live. If you listened to it, downloaded it, whatever have you. Any kind words are greatly appreciated. Again, tell your family and friends and loved ones. Word of mouth is always a tremendous way to help the show and brand grow and prosper. Thank you again to Mr. JP Acosta. Join myself and Eric Turner tomorrow night, live 7 p.m. Eastern in the Cover One film room as we break down Bills rookie running back Ray Davis, his skill set, his traits, and what he will bring to the Bills offense in 2024. So I'll either see you in the film room tomorrow night or I will see you next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern for another episode of Disguise Coverage. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I'll see you when I see you. And as always, go Bills. Oh, no, I forgot. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.